Welcome, everyone, to today's Town of Chatham Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. The date is October 27th, 2022. This meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording the meeting, please let us know. Pursuant to Governor Baker's July 16, 2022 signing of an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, including the extension of his March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law until March 13, 2023. This meeting of the Chatham Zoning Board of Appeals is being conducted via in-person and remote participation and shall afford adequate alternative means of public access via Microsoft Teams by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410. And then you got to punch in the ID number, which is 164-739-214, then hit the pound. Or you can join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. Despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access, and we will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. In accordance with town policy, the public can speak to any issue/hearing or business item on the agenda during the meeting when recognized by the chair. To authorize this form of hybrid meeting, we need a roll call of all our members. Please state your name and whether you vote yes or no. Buck.
James M. Upson, yes.
Randy Potash, yes.
Paul C. Semple, yes.
David S. Nixon, yes?
Dave Thompson, yes.
And David H. Reach, yes.
Thank you. I would ask that if any citizens or non-board members are participating in the call via the phone, please give us your name and also the last four digits of your phone number for ID purposes. We conduct the meeting in the following manner. First of all, the hearing notice will be read by the lady to my right. This is Sarah B. Clark. She is the PPO for the town of Chatham. That's the principal permitting officer. We will then have a presentation either by the applicant or their representative. When they are done, I would ask for anybody, either here or on Microsoft Teams, who's in favor of the appeal and wishes to speak, to do so. I would then read any and all correspondence we had, whether it be plus or minus. We would then ask for anybody that's against the appeal or has a specific question that wishes to enter into the conversation to please indicate, and we could recognize you. There could be some rebuttal testimony by the applicant. We would then have board members ask direct questions to anyone who participated in the above. When we were done, we would close the public hearing and go into deliberation. Deliberation is strictly amongst the six of us, unless a board member interjects into the conversation someone who is either here or, again, on Microsoft Teams. We would then have a vote in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. You need a supermajority to be successful. There are four, and that means you need 4 of the 5 votes to be in favor to be successful. 3 does not do it. And voting today are Buck, Paul, myself, the 2 Daves. Buck must leave early, and then Randy will take his spot. All votes are taken by roll calls, and I don't think I want to say anything else, except last week I reported the death of an ex-member. That was Sabina Dow, and I'm sorry to tell you about Sal Gianfredo. Passed away a couple of weeks back, and I think, Sarah, you and I are probably the only ones who served with Sal. I don't think... Paul, you did, and I don't think you did. No, okay. Well, he was a good guy, and he did a lot for this town in many different ways. So, Sal, rest in peace. With that, I would remind everybody on the board to please, 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 for Sarah's sake, use our criteria. Sometimes we forget. Use our criteria when speaking, you know. Yeah, sometimes we forget. I do. I'm as guilty as anybody, so it happens. Incidentally, Sarah, I don't know how you did it, but I thought your write-up of the first part of Main Street was excellent. You must have done that 3 or 4 times. Sarah writes all our decisions. Thank God that I don't have to do it. Paul might like to do it. I'm not too sure, but I know I don't want to do it. No, he's shaking his. Okay. With all that, all right, Sarah, let's see. I know we might have a continuance. You want to do that first?
We have the minutes of September 29th.
Oh, you want to do that first? Okay. Paul?
I will move to accept the minutes of September 29, 2022 as drafted.
And Dave Veach seconds.
That takes a roll call vote. Buck?
Buck says yes.
Paul?
All votes yes.
Dave?
Dave Thompson, yes.
Dave Veach votes
And I
yes.
vote yes, thank you. How about the 13th of October? You want to do those too?
You haven't received them yet.
I got them from you.
I believe those are scheduled for our next meeting, next week.
Okay. Okay. Sarah, 22-079, please.
Application number 22-079, David P. and Deborah S. Valente, care of James M. Norcross Esquire, P.O. Box 707, Chatham, Mass. 02633. Owners of property located at 209 Forest Beach Road, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 3B, Block 28, Lot B25. The applicant seeks to enlarge, extend, or change a conforming dwelling on a non-conforming lot via the demolition of the existing dwelling and the construction of a new dwelling. The existing dwelling is non-conforming in that it is located 20.6 feet from Toby Turtle Road where a 25-foot setback is required. The proposed dwelling will comply with all bulk and dimensional requirements of the bylaw, but is considered a substantial alteration, and under the second except clause of Section 6 of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, such substantial alteration requires the grant of a special permit. The existing building coverage is 971 square feet, 11.7%, and the proposed building coverage is 1,235 square feet, 14.9%, where 15% is the maximum allowed. The lot is non-conforming in that it contains 8,275 square feet, where 20,000 square feet is required in the R20 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 6, and Section 5B of the Chatham Protective Bylaw. This was continued from September 8th, 2022 for re-advertising.
Mr. Norcross?
Good afternoon, Jamie Norcross representing David and Deborah Valente. Dave is in the front row here with me today, and Deb is participating remotely. As Sarah just read, we were in front of you back September 8th, and this was a situation where shortly before the meeting, it was discovered that the engineer had mistakenly calculated the building coverage based on the foundation as opposed to the corner boards. And so the plans we had on September 8th, if measured from the corner boards, put us slightly over 15%. So at that meeting, the board was kind enough to allow us to go forward and show the plans in our presentation and go through the analysis, understanding that you could not vote until we reduced the size and came back with plans showing us below the 15%. So after the meeting, Dave and Deb met with their architect and the engineer. They were able to shave some square footage off the eastern side of the building. So now, as measured correctly from the corner boards, we're at 14.9%. So we are in compliance with the bylaw and being under 15%. Other than that, there's no changes to the design. It's just slightly smaller, or ever so slightly smaller. We do meet all setbacks, as we did with the prior plan, and again, we do meet building coverage. I know at 14.9, we're snug up against the 15%, so I'm sure we'll be asked, but Dave and Deb are very well aware of the limitations and the requirement that they need to meet that once the building is actually constructed, and they understand the ramifications if they don't. They've had a number of conversations with their builder, and he's expressed confidence that they'll be able to bring it in compliance with the plans. I don't believe there's any concerns from the board raised at the last meeting. Again, we're happy to answer any questions that you have today. We think it's a great project. It's really an improvement to the property and improvement to the neighborhood. And I know at your last meeting there were a number of letters in support from folks in the neighborhood. With that, be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, did we get any more letters?
We did not receive any additional correspondence.
Okay, good. All right, then, questions from the board. Buck?
Buck has no questions.
Randy?
No questions.
Paul?
I have no questions, but I would note that I did watch the tape of the September 8th hearing and reviewed the materials. I was not present on September 8th.
Okay.
Oh, I have no questions.
And I have no questions, Dave.
And I have none. Paul?
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds.
All right, we need a vote on that, Buck?
Buck votes yes.
Paul?
All votes yes.
Dave?
Dave Thompson, yes.
Dave Veach votes yes.
I vote yes. Deliberations. Randy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would say that it's an adequate size for the site, and it looks like a great project. It's compatible with the neighboring properties, and by no means detrimental to the neighborhood in any way. So I'd support it if I were voting.
Paul?
I agree with Randy's explanation of the situation and think that it's not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood.
Dave?
Dave Thompson agrees with Paul.
And I agree with all previous.
Buck?
And I agree with everyone on the board.
Okay. Do we need any conditions, Paul?
Well, do you expect that you're going to be able to contain? Do you expect you can be able to contain your construction vehicles and so forth on site?
I think so.
And what's the time frame for building?
Dave's anxious to start as soon as possible. I think they're hoping to demo shortly after the permit's issued, so beginning of December, and then probably start after the first of the year. You know, a little bit weather dependent in terms of how that proceeds, of course, but.
I think maybe just the normal all construction activity and vehicles to be contained on site or at a neighboring property with the permission of the property owner.
Okay, that good? Okay.
Move to approve on the basis of the submitted documents and with the condition that all construction activity and vehicles be contained on site or at a neighboring property with the permission of the property owner.
Dave Veach seconds.
Okay, we need a vote. Buck?
Buck votes yes.
Paul?
All votes yes?
Dave T?
Dave Thompson votes yes.
Dave Veach votes yes.
And I vote yes, that's a unanimous vote. Thank you, Mr. Norcross.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Sarah, 22-085, please.
Application number 22-085, Chatham Productions LLC, care of Greg Clark, 1234 Chestnut Street, Suite 211, Newton, Mass. 02464, owner of property located at 10 Annabelle Lane, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 14E, Block 37, Lot 2. The applicant proposes to construct a single-family dwelling in a GB2 zone, which requires the grant of a special permit. The proposed lot coverage is 5,515 square feet, 44.5%, where 70% is the maximum allowed. The lot is conforming with 12,394 square feet, where 7,000 square feet is required in the GB2 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 9, and Sections 3C, 4C, 26, and 8D2B of the protective bylaw.
Thank you, Sarah.
Ms.
Thank you.
Clark.
I'm Victoria Clark. I'm a part of the development team for Chatham Productions. Due to some unforeseen circumstances, Greg couldn't be here in person, but he is with us over Zoom. I also have Allie Clark with me, a part of the development team, as well as Peter Freeman, our counsel.
Great.
Thank you. So some background. We began working on the Annabelle Lane subdivision back in October, November of 2020. And we presented the preliminary subdivision plan to the planning board in January of 2021. When we presented the subdivision, there were 6 houses on the lot. When we went back with a definitive plan, we had decided 6 felt too crowded, so we reduced it to 4, and the definitive plan was approved back in October of 2021. Starting in November of 2021, we began working closely with the Historic Business District Commission to design all of the houses as well as the front property portion of the subdivision, because that is still a part of it. And since then, since we've been working with the HBDC closely, we think that 10 Annabelle Lane fits within the area very well, specifically in regards to the adequacy of the site. As Sarah mentioned, our lot is 12,394 square feet of buildable upland. In a GB2, the requirement is 7,000. Our lot coverage is 44.5%, where the maximum allowed lot coverage is 70%. We aim to keep our building coverage at 15%, while even though we are not a residential lot, we understand that in the bylaw, new residential lots under 20,000 square feet or less are allowed a maximum lot coverage of 15%, or 2,800 square feet. So we aim to stick with that. As seen on our site plan, our building coverage is 15% at, I think it's a little over 1,800 square feet. In regards to suitability of the use for the proposed use, we believe, and I know we sent a lot of documentation about this, in the surrounding area of the Annabelle Lane subdivision coming off of Depot Road, there are a lot of single-family and two-family homes, as well as residential condos and multi-use commercial facilities with some form of residential. So we do believe that single-family use does fit well in that area. Similarly, we believe that the impact on traffic would be very minimal if it were a residential lot. If it were commercial, that would require a lot more coming and going from the subdivision onto Depot Road, which would be a lot busier than if it were an individual single-family home. In regards to the impact on views and vistas from Main Street, as existing, the height of the Monomoy Theater and the Washington Taylor House completely block the view of 10 Annabelle Lane where it is proposed to be built on the site. Similarly, on Post Office Road, 784 Main Street, as well as 30 Post Office Road prevent any view of the proposed house from that street. And along Depot Road, there are a large, cut along the portion of the subdivision is a piece of town land that has about a 20-foot buffer of trees. So we believe that the visual impact will be very minimal based upon where this house is going on this lot. As we went through the subdivision plan with the planning board, we believe that we will be connected to municipal sewer and town water, and we believe these connections were designed and approved by the Board of Health and DPW, so we do not believe that will be a problem. We do plan on having additional underground recharge units to assure that no water runoff will leave the property. Similar to the use of other utilities and public services, the Annabelle Lane subdivision was designed to be self-contained, and the property was engineered to handle all rain flow. And the electric and gas service requirements have been confirmed by the utility companies to be of adequate availability for each lot within the subdivision. In regards to noise and litter, that it will be that of a single-family home, of a standard single-family home. Each home will be, the 10 Annabelle Lane future owners will be in charge of taking care of their own trash, as well as compatibility with the surrounding land use. As I previously mentioned, we believe that there is a lot of residential use in and around the Depot Road, Post Office Road, and Main Street area, so we do not believe that a single-family residence would disrupt the compatibility of the area. In regards to the natural environment, there are no wetlands or bodies of water on the property. In regards to slopes, we are planning on keeping all water contained within the property. As I previously mentioned, the underground recharge units will prevent that from happening. And the existing vegetation does not contain any protected plants or shrubs in the area, so that is not something we're concerned about. And then in regard to the impact on the town and the neighborhood and town visual character, we worked very closely with the design of this house with the HBDC as we're in the historic business district. And they are charged with not only the architectural style of the home, as well as the massing, the height, the scale, the materials, the colors, all of that. So after working with them closely, we believe that this house fits within the neighborhood, given if they did not believe the style and design of it worked, they would not have given us the approval. And yes, that's my presentation. Yes, I'm good.
Thank you. Is there anyone here today or on Microsoft Teams that would like to speak in favor of this application? If so, please indicate you would like to join the conversation.
I see no one that wishes to speak in favor.
I'll read the correspondence. First of all, we have a memo. This is from Judith Giorgio. She's the health agent for Chatham. She writes on 10/25, this property will be connected to a municipal sewer system and can support the proposed 3-bedroom dwelling in accordance with the Chatham Board of Health's nitrogen loading regulation and the Town of Chatham sewer regulation. I have no concerns at this time. Then we have a note. Well, actually, it's not a note. It's a certificate of appropriateness. This is from the Historic Business District Commission. They voted on August 17th, 2022, 4 in favor, 1 in opposition. And there is a specific condition. The roof overhang on the westerly elevation shall be extended across the facade to the rear of the dwelling. And that's the only specific condition. Then we have a note, this is from Edson Eldridge and Maria Polio of 30 Post Office Lane here in Chatham. They write on October 25th, "We are writing to inform the Town of Chatham Zoning Board of our support for the board's approval of the proposed new construction of homes at 10 Annabelle Lane and 15 Annabelle Lane. We are the owners of the property located at 30 Post Office Lane, abutting the Annabelle Lane subdivision. We had the pleasure of meeting with Ally, Greg, and Victoria of Chatham Productions to discuss their plans for the Monomoy Theater and the Washington Taylor property. We appreciate their willingness to discuss the plantings along our property line as well as how we can best collaborate and support each other as abutting neighbors. From the plans and sketches shared by Chatham Productions, the house designs blend well with the surrounding buildings and the overall neighborhood aesthetic. Residential use and presence will be a great addition to the neighborhood. We believe their plans will be a positive improvement to the neighborhood and a wonderful asset to the community. We support the zoning board's approval to move forward." Then we have a note, this is from Matthew Cole of 782 Main in Chatham. He writes on October 20th, "This letter is written in support of the proposed construction of 10 Annabelle Lane and 15. The applicant, Alexander Properties, has taken the time and care to review their plans with us and show us the improvements they intend to make. We believe their plans will be an improvement to the neighborhood and as an asset to the community. Thank you for your time and consideration on the matter." Then we have a note, this is from Mark Abraham of 805 Main Street. This was received on October 27th. He writes, "I write this letter in support to approve the proposed new single-family homes at 10 Annabelle Lane and 15. I am the owner of the property located at 805 Main Street and a budding neighbor to the Annabelle Lane subdivision, the Monomoy Theater, and the Washington Taylor House. I am in favor of the proposed plans. I believe it will be an improvement to the neighborhood and will be of value to the Chatham community. From the plans and sketches shared with me by Ally of Chatham Productions, I have no objections for the further development of both 10 Annabelle and 15 Annabelle, as well as the intended improvements to the property as a whole. Overall, the house designs blend well with the surrounding buildings and the neighborhood aesthetic. I support the ZBA's approval to move forward with 10 Annabelle and 15 Annabelle." For those who don't know, the 15 Annabelle is another app that's coming up, I think, the next time around. Okay, that's the extent of the correspondence. Questions from, no, let's see, I should ask for, is there anyone here today or on Microsoft Teams who would like to speak either against or has a specific question? There's the opportunity to do so. We'll start with the gentleman in the back who stood up.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Bill Litchfield here on behalf of the Chatham Athletic Association. You will recall that I spoke on behalf of the Athletic Association at a hearing you conducted back in April. And the April 28 date is one I would ask you to keep in mind. And another date is November 3rd, 2016. I'll get to that shortly. The Chatham Athletic Association is less concerned with this property, Lot 2, because it does not bear directly or back up directly to Veterans Field. There are still some concerns, however, that we have generally, and part of these, I suppose, are mine and not just those of my client. You're all familiar with the purpose and intent of the bylaw, and that's what we're here to serve. And not too many years ago, we had a master plan that was adopted which talked about minimizing rather than maximizing land use. And I tend to think that this is a maximization of land use. A lot of the comments that were made at the April 28 hearing in regard to an adjacent property, I think, still apply here. And I was struck, I said April 28, I went back and I listened to some of your comments. You observed that, one member observed that he listened to the planning board hearing, and the planning board had no choice. They were obligated to approve the subdivision plan. And the planning board told the applicant that the planning board couldn't turn it down, but where land use decisions would be made was at the Zoning Board of Appeals. that applies here as well. I think you could find, there was a comment earlier about new lots of 20,000 square feet or less are allowed to have 15% coverage. We haven't had new residential lots of 20,000 square feet or less since 1982. The town made a decision in 1982 not to allow new residential lots of less than 20,000 square feet. I think you could find that the site is not adequate in light of when you exclude some of the configuration of it, it's somewhat less, I think, than 12,000 square feet. But a house with a gross floor area of 5,300 square feet on a lot of this size, I think suggests that the site may not be suitable. In the prior hearing on the same development, a member felt that the size of the houses is unbelievable and disheartening, and I'm quoting. Another found it to be a massive house on a very small lot, was concerned that they would be seasonal rather than year-round housing, which is something we need. I think you could find those things apply to Lot 2. Again, it has less of an impact on the Chatham Athletic Association, but the board found that, or at least one member of the board, I think several, found that this was not the place for market-rate housing. The other date that I want to bring to your mind is November 3rd, 2016, because there had been a suggestion in the prior hearing that you had approved a residential development in a general business zone on Hydrangea Lane. So I went back and I watched that hearing as well, and several members of this board were present then and voted in favor of it. It was not unanimously approved, but the applicant pointed that out. And at your April 28 hearing, at least one of you said yes, and those houses loom and are inappropriate. But the more important thing about what happened on November 3rd, 2016, is that a subdivision in a commercial zone was presented to you all at once. You reviewed all 3 lots on Hydrangea Lane. 3 separate hearings. It was all for the same parcel being subdivided. But what you have to do here is to make a determination as to whether the house at 10 Annabelle is in keeping with the established or future character of the neighborhood. You're having one more hearing next week in regard to an adjacent lot. You're presumably be having 2 more hearings at future dates in regard to 2 other lots. I don't know, given your obvious knowledge and the applicant's knowledge that there are going to be future residential dwellings proposed for this development, I don't know how you can make a determination divided in that way. I would suggest that it would be more appropriate, and the applicant may have been offered the opportunity to have 4 hearings for 4 lots. I don't know what happened in that regard. But I would think it would be very, very difficult for you to make a determination on Lot 2, 10 Annabelle Lane, without knowing the size, the scale, the scope of the other houses that are proposed for adjacent lots. The purpose and intent of the bylaw is to manage growth and development so as to ensure appropriate use of land. I don't know how you can do that without looking at the overall parcel. Now, if you want to approve Lot 2 by itself with an understanding that there will be no additional residential development, that would be perfectly acceptable to me and to the Chatham Athletic Association. But absent that, I don't think you can make an accurate reading or make a determination as to the future of the character, the impact on of this development on the established or future character of the neighborhood. Again, the Athletic Association has significantly less concerns about Lot 2 because it's not going to have the impact on Veterans Field that other parcels might. I would observe that it is clear that our bylaw, it's what's called, we have zoning, what's called Euclidean zoning. It sounds mathematical, it's not. It actually comes from Euclid, Ohio, which is 120 years ago they decided that businesses should go here, residences should go there. And that's what our bylaw, like every other bylaw around, requires. There are exceptions. There are pre-existing nonconformities, and there are, in some cases, occasions where an individual lot might be appropriately used otherwise, on the outskirts of a commercial zone, but not in the middle of a commercial zone. The bylaw gives you the authority, however, to make a determination that a proposed residential development or residential house is appropriate in the GB zone. You have the power to make that decision, but I think in this case, I know that you have the discretion not to grant that special permit. And I am confident that until you know all of what's proposed for the neighborhood, you have the wisdom not to grant the special permit. And I thank you.
There was a second gentleman in the back? Yes, sir.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Peter Farber, and I'm here not representing anyone, but just speaking as a townsperson. I just want to emphasize a couple of things, and I certainly don't want to repeat what the previous speaker said. But this matter of discretion, I think, is very, very important. In 2001, there was a case of David Davis versus the Zoning Board of Chatham. And I argued that case for Mr. Davis and lost at the Board of Appeals and on appeal to the Land Court. But what came out of that case was a statement of the law that I think is very important that all of you should keep in mind today. And it has to do with this matter of discretion. And compared again, as Mr. Litchfield said, the planning board had no discretion. The subdivision control law is very different. If a plan meets the regulations, the rules and regulations of the board, of the planning board has to approve the plan. Regarding a special permit application, it's a very different standard. And I'll read from the case. This is from the Massachusetts Appeals Court. Even if the record reveals that a desired special permit could lawfully be granted by the board because the applicant's evidence satisfied the statutory and regulatory criteria, the board retains discretionary authority to deny the permit. As long as the decision of the board, I'm not quoting now, but as long as the board's decision is not based on a legally untenable or arbitrary or capricious ground, the board need not cite any particularized reasons for any specific evidence for its denial decision. Nevertheless, its action will be upheld, as will the ruling of any judge affirming that action, if a rational basis exists to support the record. I want to focus on the first criteria. I don't think I need to go on. Obviously, this is not a case involving noise or litter or sufficiency of utilities and that sort of thing. But it does very much have to do with the adequacy of the site in terms of the size for the proposed use. The lot, of course, at 12,000 square feet is substantially undersized for residential use. As Mr. Litchfield indicated, in 1982, the town meeting did away with any building on any lot for residential use under 20,000 square feet. So that was what, 82, 92, 2002, 40 years ago. 40, and that was a vote of over 86% of the townspeople at that town meeting. That is a clear indication, I think, from all those of us who were citizens of Chatham at that time or have become citizens since that time, that we're in this town, we don't want residential use of any lot under 20,000 square feet. And that's a given. That's the way it's been. That's the way it should remain. And this is This application today is before you only because the lot is in a GB district, where obviously when the bylaw was established, the GB district was considered for commercial use, business use. There are provisions for apartments pertinent there too, but not residential use, not single-family dwellings. That alone gives you the rational basis to deny this decision, and of course, the three that would come after this. So I would ask you that you do apply your discretion and say, we're not going to upset what the town voted 40 years ago. We're not going to allow large single-family dwellings on lots under 20,000 square feet. The application, I must compliment the applicant. They did a very professional job presenting this. But at the same time, I think it's important that this particular application relative to Lot 2, the 10 Annabelle Lane, should not be considered with any sort of thought about the Monomoy Theater or the house, I forget the name of it, that's on the street, Main Street. Because first of all, no permits have been granted by any any zoning type board for those uses, and there's no commitment. There's a commitment on TV or something like that, but as we all know, there's been no permits granted. We have no way, the town has no way of enforcing any obligations to do anything with the Monomoy Theater or the house up on Main Street. So I would say limit your concerns, your considerations and deliberations today to this particular lot and focus on the size of the lot and the fact that it does not meet the square footage that's required for residential use. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else here who would like to speak against this or has a specific question? I don't see anyone. Sarah, anyone else on Microsoft Teams?
I don't see anyone on Teams that wishes to speak.
Okay. Victoria Clark, would you like time for a rebuttal?
Yes, thank you. I know our council will also come up here to speak to more things, but one thing I quickly did want to point out before Mr. Freeman comes up here is that I believe Mr. Litchfield said that our building coverage was 5,000 plus square feet when the lot is 12,000. That is the total lot coverage because we are a general business. I just wanted to clarify that it includes our driveway as well as our patios and our building coverage itself. The building coverage is only 1,800 square feet. So I just wanted to clarify that because it was spoken recently. Oh,
Not yet. You
John.
still have the floor.
Sorry. I wasn't sure if you needed me to repeat something. But no, I think.
Ms. Clark,
Yes.
if you could speak up a little bit, it would be appreciated.
Okay, sorry about that. What I just said was that I believe Mr. Litchfield had said that the building coverage was in the 5,000 square footage, but that is not the building coverage. That is our total lot coverage because we are a GB2 zone, so we have to show our whole lot coverage, and that includes our driveway as well as some patios in the back. The building coverage itself is only 1,800 square feet, so it's at 15%, the building itself. I just wanted to clarify that because it had been said. And I believe Peter's going to come up now to help rebuttal as well.
Yes, could you introduce this gentleman, please, Ms. Clark, because I presume he's speaking to you at your request.
Yes, this is Peter Freeman, our counsel.
Okay.
Yes, for the record, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Peter Freeman from Freeman Law Group in Yarmouth Port, representing the applicant. I'm not speaking as a member of the public. I'm here as their advocate, as their attorney. And I know Mr. Litchfield and Mr. Farber very well. They're both fine attorneys. But I do respectfully disagree with their positions, including statements of the law. The applicant has every right to be here. That's the way the bylaw works, to apply for the houses on a house-by-house basis. The zoning bylaw could have said that it has to be a whole development that's approved, but it doesn't. and the lots are buildable, that's the second point, or else they couldn't have been approved by the subdivision. Yes, a special permit is needed, but constantly talking about years ago when the town said no more single-family houses on lots less than 20,000 square feet, that's not accurate because, subject to your discretion, and I'll get into that myself, you have every right to grant a special permit for the houses on these lots. So I think that that's an incorrect statement of the status and the law as to your zoning bylaw. The second point is, or the perhaps third point now, is the whole question of discretion. The way they have explained discretion makes it sound almost as though you have the right to veto an application. Yes, if you have a rational basis, but you can't just, regardless of how detailed your findings are or are not, you cannot ignore all of the criteria that are in the bylaw. And as I think Mr. Farber, or maybe Bill Litchfield, also complimented my client for putting together a very thorough and good application, all of which is accurate. If you go through all of those impact areas, visual impact, the neighborhood character, the traffic, and all of the things that you heard today from all of the letters that you just read, and I'll cite a few in a minute, clearly, when you go down point by point, there really isn't a rational basis to make a finding that this house doesn't fit in. So that's a very important point when you consider, ultimately deliberate, what discretion means. It just doesn't mean that you can rely on the fact that in other areas of town that don't benefit from a special permit provision, there's no longer lots for residential use less than 20,000 square feet. But that's essentially irrelevant to an application like this. Another factor is simply the whole aspect of the impact of the various letters of support. And I think it was Mr. Litchfield who talked about the size of the houses, not the lots. As I think Victoria pointed out, it's very significant that the Historic Business District Commission approved this house. Very significant, because they do have the authority, regardless of what type of district it's in use-wise from a zoning viewpoint. They reviewed it and worked with my client to come up with something that was approved, and they found that the style, the size, the massing, the materials, all of the things that Victoria mentioned, and I was chairman of the Old Kings Highway Historic District for years, so I'm very familiar with historic preservation and the purpose, and it's a very important process. And if the Historic Business District thought that the house was inappropriate in any way, they could have either denied or suggested further conditions. There was one condition which certainly we'll comply with, but they didn't. They found it very approvable, and they did approve it. And I think that has to make a very large impact on your deliberations. Likewise, from all the other impact areas, you have Board of Health and DPW. There's no negative impact from this project. And the fact that the immediate neighbors, there were several of them that were read. I don't know if there were other letters that came in before, but there are multiple letters of the immediate neighbors who support the application, thinking that it is indeed appropriate and an improvement, an attribute for the town in the area. And that's very important. And as their application said, it is in the business district, but there are many, many, many single-family residential houses around it. So again, when you correlate that to the purpose intent of the bylaw and the criteria that are listed, this house is very compatible. So those are the salient factors, and I respectfully would suggest that when, as we say, brother counsel say that your discretion means you could find some rational basis to reject it, I think that is bestowing on a zoning board a power to veto when, in fact, picking up on what he said, if the town didn't want single-family residential in this area, they could have made such a vote, but they didn't. It's very different to ban that use compared to putting the special permit status. So the other council are basically equating the special permit provision with your ability to say, well, the rest of the town indicated, or in the past indicated, we don't want a single family, so that's a reason to deny it. Well, that's not true, because you have to go through all of the specific criteria and factors that both Victoria and I just went through. So I'll end with that, and I think that it's not only approvable, but that you very much should approve it, and it will be a huge improvement for the area and an asset for the town. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. I didn't ask you, Ms. Clark, to go through the criteria because you had submitted to us quite a lot about it, and I want to apologize to the audience because usually we do that, but I don't think that we need to do that in this case. So, thank you both, yeah? Okay, so we have Mr. Greg Clark on the line, I believe.
Good afternoon, how are you?
Okay,
I just wanted to clarify one of the statements, an inaccurate statement that was made
can
by
you just,
Attorney
excuse me, can
Litchfield.
you just speak up a bit?
Sure. I wanted to clarify.
Thank you.
One inaccurate statement that was made by Attorney Litchfield. He stated that 15% lot coverage of the building footprint is a maximum land use for this property. Without requiring to get a special permit, we can put commercial buildings on these properties. And the lot coverage is allowed to be up to 70%. So if we don't do residential on this property and we come back for commercial buildings, I don't believe we're required to ask for a special permit if we keep our coverage to 70%, whereas today we're applying with a single-family residence that covers about 44%, if I'm correct. So I just wanted to clarify that this is not a maximum land use as was stated. Thank you very much.
Okay. Sarah, is there anybody else who wishes to join?
I do not see any other hands raised.
Okay. Then we will have questions from the board. Paul?
Actually, one sort of overall question I would have is that when I was looking at the site today, and as I considered the prior proposal for Lot 15, I did have a certain uncomfortableness in dealing with these on individual basis, in the sense that it made more sense to me to assess the adequacy of the site and suitability and impact on neighborhood visual character if I was looking at the 4 proposed lots at one time. So I'm wondering whether that would be a possibility from your viewpoint. I mean, we would do it with 4 separate hearings presumably, but that would give us the overall picture of what this is going to look like. And that's of significance considering that we're dealing with a GB2 zone. Is that a proposal that you would think would be appropriate?
Well, I have an initial response, and Victoria and Mr. Clark, if you wanted to respond after my statement, but I don't think that that is going to be helpful, and I certainly don't think it's required, because each house is on its case-by-case basis. And you take each application and each property as it comes into you. And in this case, as I said earlier, if the town wanted to only approve the subdivision itself through a zoning board special permit, which is sometimes the case, be it open space cluster or other provisions, they could have done that, but they didn't. So there's a valid subdivision plan approved. There are 4 lots that my client owns, and yes, they're going to put houses on each of them, subject to the special permit provision. But I don't really think it's necessary or appropriate to withdraw this application and combine the 4 houses into one application, because they stand on their own merits. And if the finding for one house which we are here requesting, and as I stated, without being redundant, I think merits approval of a special permit, then that house meets the criteria. And simply by saying, well, that house times 4 somehow doesn't meet the criteria, goes in the face of, again, the specificity in the bylaw that you're looking at a house on a particular lot and how it fits in with the neighborhood. So, again, I respect the question, picking up on what Mr. Litchfield said, but I don't think that it's legally appropriate or necessary.
Well, I'm not suggesting that you would withdraw the application and then make one application for 4 lots at a time. What I was suggesting is that you take the 4 applications for the 4 lots and present them at the same time so that we would have a better feel for the impact on the neighborhood and the adequacy of the site for the uses that are being proposed. I'm not saying you're required to do that. I'm just asking whether that is an option that you think would make sense.
I personally, I think Greg might be able to speak to this a little more than myself.
Yes.
Yes.
Victoria, I have my hand up, but I'll speak if I'm recognized.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the big issues with that was this. This is what changed, what made us go with this option instead, because as everyone knows, we purchased the property over 3 years ago, and we came to the town, we sat with the town and asked the town, what would you like to see in this area? And the first thing we were told was we'd like to see some housing in there, some multifamily housing. We spent the next year plus trying to get a multifamily 55 plus residential project installed there, which would have had 4 to 6 affordable units under the requirements. As we all know, that was not approved, it was shot down. Everyone likes to say that they want more units and they want affordables, but when the truth comes to a vote on it, it usually doesn't happen in most towns. So we spent that time, and then we went back to the drawing board. We said, okay, what's next? Let's look at what other options we have there. We know we can develop commercial properties there. It's, by right, we can take that 4-lot subdivision, put 4 commercial buildings in there. But we wanted to try to do something with the property out front and use funding from the back to do such. So we chose to do the single-family homes, and the problem with the process is that we have to go through HBDC with each one individually. When we first tried to submit 4 houses to them, it was very daunting, and we weren't getting anywhere on any approvals. So we pulled back and we said, let's take them one at a time. And we can't design the rest of the site work for that building until we have each individual building approved. So we're doing them one at a time. We have 3 of them approved now, 3 of them are in, but again, we have to file when all that work is done on each individual, and then whenever the ZBA's next available time slot is, we get assigned to it. So we know that if we waited for all 4, we'd be talking next February. And we did not want to wait for that because we've had the property for 3 years, and we're going to make a decision to move forward. So one way or the other, if it's not residential, it's going to be the commercial, and we're going to move. So we want to just push it forward. That's the reason why we didn't choose to submit them all at one time. Okay?
Okay, thank you. I think you've answered my question. With respect to the site plan itself and what you have proposed, there's a retaining wall which runs along all of the eastern and good portion of the southern side of the site. What would that retaining wall look like?
Stone-wise, or do you mean?
Stone-wise.
We have, I don't have it on me, but we have a stone that was approved by the HBDC because they have purview over that as well. So I believe it is, I don't have it on me, but I believe it's some kind of natural stone from somewhere in the New England region. I don't remember specifically because each house has a different kind of stone, but.
Would it have the same appearance as what appears to be sort of your lower level, garage level on the west elevation?
Yes, similar.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and that would run along the whole eastern side of the property?
Yes, that is
basically?
correct.
And the way it is and the way it is designed is that there are 3 feet of stone wall exposed on any line, any wall that faces in a butter. We cannot have any more than 3 feet exposed, so that's how those are designed.
And is the lot being raised from what's there now behind that wall?
Can you show me?
I do not believe so, because as it exists currently, there is, the house that it is sitting on, or where the house is sitting, is very similar to where one of the former structures at the, still exists on the property, that exists right beyond the circle. There is a retaining wall that currently exists there. It's much higher than 3 feet, so we're adjusting the grading on, we'll have to adjust the grading on, a little bit, but I don't, off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly how much it was.
And
So if you look at the grade, if you look at the grading plan that Sarah has up there, you can see where the existing 40, you see the circle number 40 along the 117.99 dimension on the bottom portion of the property?
Yep.
Yes, right there. So the dashed line represents the existing line of where elevation 40 is, and the solid line with the square 40 represents what the new elevation of 40, where that will be. So the answer is that the basement, the level of the lower level of that building is, we're not removing material to get to that point. It's a drive down from the Annabelle Lane circle down into that basement garage.
okay. And am I correct in thinking that coming down from Annabelle Lane, you're going to be at first right there and go down underneath the house to a garage that's on the west side?
Correct.
And then what is the depiction that goes along over to the east side? Is that another driveway?
That's the driveway for the other lot.
Okay, so it butts up to the stone wall that you're going to be, the retaining wall that you're going to be creating. So that would just be parking there against that wall?
Actually,
That,
since we submitted this,
Yeah,
that
that's-
driveway will no longer be for lot 3, which is the one you're referring to. It will run parallel how, I don't know if you recall, but for lot 4, how it went down the panhandle and turned to the left-hand side, the lot 3 driveway will run similar. And instead of turning towards the side of the property that is parallel to lot 2, it will be, their driveway will be parallel to lot 4. So it won't, that driveway won't be there anymore.
yeah, this section of parking that you see there now is all lawn under the proposal that we're working on currently.
Okay, so that will not be driveway the way it's depicted here?
Yes.
Correct.
I have no other questions.
Mr. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. As of right now, I do not have any questions for you, but I reserve the right to come back to you. Thank you.
Dave Each.
Yeah, so, well, let me just pick up where Paul, where Paul was, and just confirm, by my reading the site plan. I think your question, Paul, was about the, behind the 3-foot-high retaining walls on the 2 sides of the property. And what I see there is that that's proposed to be at elevation 48. And it looks to me like the existing grade, if you will, where that now is currently a driveway going behind the Monomoy Theater building, that's shown to be elevation 40 existing. So, yes, the retaining wall is going to show about 3 feet, but there's also about, we're talking 8 feet overall. So I guess the lower part of the retaining wall is going to be fill and landscaping material, whatever. So, but 48, I'm seeing it as being at 48 feet. and that the existing grade in that area is 40 feet. Is that correct?
I don't believe so, and I know it's
Well,
not very clear on this
I
plan.
can answer that.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yes, I can answer that. So in the area where you see where the stone wall is basically three-sided and returns to the house and then runs along the subdivided property line of this lot and the lot that contains the theater building,
Yeah.
and then returns along the other line. That area inside there will get filled, yes. That area gets filled so that when you come out of the house, you're coming out at the first floor level in that area.
Right, and first floor level is elevation 50, correct?
First floor elevator, yes,
50.2.
50.2, correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So am I correct in assuming that that's about 10 feet above the existing grade in that area?
It's 10 feet above the existing exterior grade, correct?
Yes, great, okay.
It's not 10 feet above the existing first floor of the existing house. on
No,
that-
no,
on that
that's,
property.
that looks to be maybe about 3 feet above the existing grade in that
Correct.
area roughly, yeah.
Yep.
But you're not presenting this as a replacement of that house, really?
No.
So we're not comparing this to that house. I have a bunch of other questions, but most of them are not related. They're related to other aspects of the project, I guess. So I guess I'll stick with my questions and things strictly with regard to this site. Thanks. For now, thank you.
Bob?
So I'm a little uncomfortable. The, Mr. Litchfield, who's well-known, been in town a few years, moderator, Board of Selectmen, and practicing for many years, thought that it was appropriate for us to look at the total project before we decide on some of our criteria about in the neighborhood and whether or not it's compares with the hydrangea way on Crowell Road. And the presenter's representative says not so. That leaves me in a quandary. I wish I had a question to separate it, but I don't have one.
Randy?
I don't have any questions, but any comments that I would make would be based on the criteria for this application, and not about what people think we ought to do in terms of things that aren't related to the criteria.
Okay, well, before we go to deliberations, did you want to?
Just one other thing.
Both of you
I'm
gentlemen
sorry, I
had
hadn't
reserved
made
your,
my
yeah.
notes. I think I can perhaps clarify the number that Bill Litchfield used and the number that you heard it to be. I believe, and I did a little stab this myself, that I believe that the number he used was what we call gross floor area. And that's defined in our rules and regulations, and we frequently see gross floor areas for houses that are presented to us, new ones as well. And so, no, I don't think he was confused with the lot coverage of other aspects of the building itself. The gross floor area in this case would be, I have 1,855 square feet, which would be the basement, 1,855 square feet of the first floor. And then I kind of took a stab at some of the reductions for the second floor where the ceiling height might be less than 5 feet. And I come up with about 1,784 square feet there. So I come up with a total about 5,494. I think Bill used 5,300 square feet. So that's relative to a term that we use and use from time to time. We also have, and so That's the reason, I think, for confusion there. And
That would make s-
your numbers didn't present that to us.
That
Thank
would
you.
make sense if I misheard gross floor area versus building coverage.
Yeah,
A
okay.
simple mistake.
Sure, thanks. All right, Dave, sorry.
Did you have any questions? You reserve the right to ask.
That's very true. Ms. Clark, have you ever thought of going through there and brushing the property out, meaning taking the vines out, so someone could go through and actually walk through all that stuff? I would assume, but I'm not an engineer, that it would be a little bit difficult for a surveyor to get in there and actually see the land.
I guess that would require us to remove some of the trees and such.
No. I'm not saying going and cutting trees down. Just take some of the brush out, brush it out, so somebody can move around in there. That's,
So I can address that. We actually did that with, so we had several on-site inspections when we were going through HBDC. And obviously, in the summer months, the late spring, summer, and early fall months, it's difficult because all the vines and all the invasives have taken over the growth on the property. But during the winter months, it's actually very clear. You can walk in there and walk right through. We've been over there and done it. And we're required to stake out. You know, they've asked us to stake out several of the proposed houses so that they could see exactly how they fall. And our surveyors are able to get in there and do that. We have thought about going down there and doing some clearing of the property. We're trying to get through the process with the town to, work through the first one or two of these together and then say, okay, let's look at the other outlying issues, because as we proposed and we offered to the town in both our HBDC meetings and my subsequent conversations with the town manager and the selectmen, that we would propose to plant trees on the town property where the town had removed all their trees, to provide a nice tree buffer and get rid of the invasives that are right now climbing on top of everything on the property, and give a nicer view for the future.
sir, that's not really what I was looking for at all. I don't really, at this stage of the game, I'm not interested in what you're going to do when the project's all done and taking the vines. What I'm looking for is to go in there with like a Gravely brush cutter and cutting some of the brush so that someone could walk in there and see what the scope of the land is. That's all I'm saying, sir. I would happen to be in Captain's Walk, which is a development off of 28 in North Chatham, and there was a young gentleman in there just doing what I was asking you about. Thank you, sorry.
Okay? Yeah, all right. Paul?
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Could I ask for a moment for one or two just final comments in rebuttal?
Sure.
Thank you. Won't be long. In essence, with everything that Mr. Litchfield and Mr. Faber said, I don't really hear any statement or assertion that the proposed house is in any way inappropriate, other than one statement by Mr. Litchfield about the total gross floor area. But that's where two things. Number one, as we said, the Historic Business District Commission, that's the authority and the agency that would make objection to that if they thought that the size affected its compatibility and its approvability under the even more strict historic standards. So I don't think that that's a rational basis to make a determination that's negative. Secondly, as Victoria pointed out, you could have a larger commercial building. So that's appropriate in terms of considering the scale and the size of the proposed house, when you could have a larger building as of right. So what their position essentially still comes down to, which I think was my main point earlier, is the history of the zoning and up zoning for size of residential lots and not wanting houses on lots under 20,000 square feet and not wanting houses in this area, that's again a legally untenable position because the town didn't vote to say no residential in this district. And so they really conflate that history with some aspect of what the zoning bylaw really says. So I'd respectfully just finish with the fact that your decision has to be based on the various criteria, and we meet the criteria, and it will be an improvement, and the immediate neighbors and others, I believe, support it. And so that's what I would remind you. Thank you.
Paul,
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Each seconds.
we need a vote on that, Bud?
Buck votes yes.
Paul?
All votes yes?
Dave?
Dave Thompson votes yes.
Dave Each votes
And
yes.
I vote yes. Deliberations. Let's start with Dave Each.
Okay.
Let me guess.
Wow, I guess, there's, I just have had a lot of thoughts about this, and I certainly, with respect to, what Dave just indicated, and I think Paul indicated as well, and some others, I certainly would have preferred that the presentations to us to be a little more comprehensive with respect to what's being proposed for the site. This sort of narrowing of our focus because of the creation of a subdivision. I guess that certainly arguments can be made along those lines, but it doesn't help necessarily for us to help us do our jobs. And so I cannot support this, and my reasons being, with respect to the criteria, anyway, the criteria number one, adequacy of the size of the site in terms of size for the proposed use. We're talking about residential use, and we're talking about putting perhaps multiple residential uses in this subdivision. Number two, suitability of the site for the proposed use. So this is in the heart of the General Business 2 district, in my judgment. I've lived in that neighborhood. I think that my concern continues to be that this unfortunately, is a leveraging of the General Business 2 dimensional requirements being less than in residential zones, primarily. I appreciate the consideration of keeping the footprint to 15% or less of the lot size. Arguably that's a good thing to do. But as far as any of the other dimensional requirements, first of all, the lot size, it can be as small as 7,000 square feet. As they've shown, they've indicated that they could do more, or have proposed more, either residential uses or business uses, lots in that location, which they can do for business uses. Number 8, compatibility of the proposed use with surrounding land uses. That's where I have a lot of problems. I mean, yes, there are single-family residences in other parts of the zone, much more peripheral, in my judgment. I think that I certainly respect the HBDC. I served my time on the HBDC. I served as chairman for a number of years as well. So And it's been a while, so I'm not sure, you know, trying to remember back to all their criteria. But as far as scale, siting, and mass, yes, they do pass judgment on that, but we need to pass judgment on that as well. And I'm not going to think that they necessarily are okay with all that. I think when they're okay with the designs, and I don't really have a problem with the design of this house. I think it's a nice looking house. I do have a little bit more of a problem in that it's gonna be, you know, well, I guess the first floor level is gonna be at least 7 or 8 feet higher than the house that's there right now. That would be a problem for me. So it is gonna have much more of a visual impact than what's there for that reason alone. But because of these use issues, I just cannot, I find that this, and aside from this, I do find that this is not, it's not in harmony with the purposes and intent of the bylaw. In essence, I'm sorry to say, but in essence, is saying that they've created this 4-lot subdivision, which they met the requirements of the planning board. They were able to do that. But this is general business zoned, is a general business zone. Now, we can and have from time to time granted special permits for, and we are, via special permit, can grant special permits for a single-family dwelling within the business district. But I just see this as, I mean, I guess the only way I think I could support this particular one would be to the exclusion of any other residential development on the other lots, because otherwise I see that this is in essence saying, knowing that the underlying zoning doesn't change when we give a permit for a single-family dwelling. In essence, for me, the creation of this subdivision with the likelihood of having 4 residential properties on it via special permit from us is essentially saying we might as well call this an R13 zone right in the middle of the general business district. So I cannot support it for that reason. I'm sorry to say, it's a nice looking house. It has much less impact than what was proposed to us in April, and I think also is proposed to come to us at our next meeting. I've looked at that. So I can't support it for those reasons.
Buck?
You're making it awful hard on me, Mr. Veach, to add anything new to that statement. But I did listen to number 2 and number 8, suitability and compatibility, and I think you're making some excellent points there. The small lot size in combination with the other proposed ones coming, they're squeezing everything they can out of it, and I'm uncomfortable with it. And unfortunately, I can't support it.
Randy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just for the record, I read Davis v. the Town of Chatham twice, and Mr. Faber is exactly right. And I have to give him credit as a fellow attorney for bringing up a case that he lost and making what I'm sure applicants think and plaintiffs think is bad law, because it made it very difficult for people now compared to if that was a gray area. It's not a gray area. But this board would never just willy-nilly and frivolously deny an application. Everybody always gives their reasoning and the criteria, but they don't actually have to based on that case. It's a fact. But as long as those criteria could be found, if the court finds it. And the criteria that I consider, and I know my colleagues consider, are not whether the HBDC provided support for it or not. That's not one of the criteria. And also, how many letters came in? That's not part of the criteria either. So the things that we look at are adequacy of the size of the site, and that's been spoken to, and I agree with Mr. Veach. The suitability of the site for the proposed use, that's been spoken to, and I agree with my colleagues. I won't repeat, there's been a lot of repetition here today. And the preamble to the criteria says, special permits may be granted when found that the use involved will not be detrimental to the neighborhood and the town, when it's been found that the use involved will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the bylaw. And one of the purposes and intent of the bylaw is prevention of overcrowding of land. And in my mind, one large house in this area is overcrowding already. So whether or not there'd be one or four, I think one is too many. And the main reason for that is any single-family homes in this area, and I've been round and round, I've lived here for about 8.5 years, so I'm nowhere near the depth and breadth of everybody else's experience, but I have looked around quite a bit, and this is a pretty modest neighborhood when it comes to single-family houses. And so the only way I think this could work, in my mind, would be to do a special permit for the home that already exists there, and that would have different, maybe a different idea in terms of what people think if you took that one house that's there now and maybe tried to either renovate it or tear it down and build a new one right there. So if I were voting, I would not support it.
Paul?
Well, I agree with the comments that Mr. Veach made quite eloquently, I think. And I think in looking at the scale, siting, and mass of the building, especially the elevation of the house and the visual impact that that may have, I would find that it does not meet the criteria in the sense that it's not in harmony with the purposes and intent of the bylaw. And as a result, I would not support a special permit in this situation.
Mr. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. I agree with everything that has been said so far. It seems as if, I love this, squeezing everything out of the property that you can get. I just look around at the neighborhood, and I'm looking at a big neighborhood. If you're trying to say that this Annabelle Lane is a neighborhood, that's a neighborhood of 4 or 5 houses. That's not a neighborhood. It's a nice home, but it doesn't belong there. This is I'm at a loss for words, actually. I never thought in my life that I'd see something like that off Depot Road. And I can brag and say that I've lived in this town for 73 years. What you're trying to do, and I said this the first time this came before the Zoning Board of Appeals, what you're trying to do is not conducive to that end of town. So I will vote against it.
Ms. Clark, I think you can add pretty well. Your choices are, we can continue and have a vote, or you could withdraw. It's up to you.
Greg Clark is still on
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually texted Mr. Clark. Greg, if you're here, if you want to think about it, talk to me for a minute. Perhaps you'd indulge us with a slight recess for a minute. But Greg, if you're still here, you can respond or just ask to speak to me in confidence.
He is no longer on the meeting.
Must be on private phone.
Apologize, I guess the family will.
So are you asking for a 5-minute recess?
I think a few minutes would be fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, 5-minute recess. Okay, we're back, everybody. Please have your seats. Mr. Frieda.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members, appreciate the courtesy in giving us that break to talk to my client. So the answer is, we do not want to withdraw. We would like you to proceed with a vote.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very well. Okay. So remember, if you vote no, that means you're not in favor of the plan. If you vote yes, you are. Paul, if you make a motion, please.
I'll move to approve the application as submitted.
Dave Veach seconds.
Okay, we need a vote on that. Buck,
Yes. Buck votes yes.
you voted yes.
I thought we were saying yes to go into, see, you told me precise. Buck votes no.
Paul votes no.
Dave Thompson votes no also.
Dave Veach votes no.
And I vote no. That's 5-0. Thank you very much for your presentation. Okay. Sorry, Buck. I got you confused.
Everybody says I vote no. I voted yes.
Okay. All right. So. Let's see, Sarah. We ought to be on to 22-086, please.
Application number 22-086, 20 Jericho Lane LLC, care of William F. Riley Esquire, P.O. Box 707, Chatham, Mass. 02633. Agreed vendee of property located at 20 Jericho Lane, also shown in the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 10B, Block 19, Lot B2. The applicant seeks to reconstruct a pre-existing non-conforming private residential pier. The existing pier is non-conforming in that it is 118 feet long, is located 1 foot over the northerly abutter's property line. The square footage of the floats is 348, where 300 square feet is the maximum allowed, and is located 76 feet from an adjacent pier. The proposed reconstructed pier will be non-conforming in that it will be 118 feet long, will be 1 foot from the northerly abutter, where a 25-foot setback is required, and will be located 76 feet from an adjacent pier where 250 feet is required. Also proposed is the construction of a conforming 8x12 shed. The property is located in an R20 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Sections 6 and 9, and Sections 5B and 8D 2B of the protective bylaw.
Mr. Riley.
Mr. Nixon, thank you. I hate to say I wasn't listening, but were you reading the very first notice that we filed?
Yes, because it wasn't, I did, they are the owner, not the agreed vendee, correct?
Yeah, well, they are the owner, but, you know, I thought we submitted a new description of what we wanted. But if we didn't, all right, so, Bill Riley on behalf of, actually the Lebovitz family, 20 Jericho Lane LLC. So this property has an existing dock that's licensed by the Commonwealth. And the dock consisted of a walkway, elevator walkway that's 4 feet wide, and then a series of floats out to a float to tie a boat to. And so the existing float is 10 by 20, and we have can you put the site plan up, Sarah? The cross section. It's down at the lower left corner. A little higher, there you go, perfect. Okay, so the lowest section is the existing pier. So you have the elevated walkway, the ramp to some walkway floats, I'll call them, and then a float to tie the boat to. So these floats actually rest on the bottom at low tide. So the Lebovitz family wanted to improve the situation. They don't like the floats because they're wobbly, and they sit on the bottom, which is a bad thing for the bottom. So they what they're proposing is an elevated walkway to a ramp to a single float. The single float would be larger than the existing float. Instead of 10 by 20, it would be 8 by 32. And we've discussed the size of the float with the harbor master, and he has no problems with it. So, so what we're proposing is a pier of the same length. The walkway is a little narrower. It's 3 feet 3 inches instead of 4 feet. And the float is somewhat larger. The plan was done by Dave Clark. Dave is here if you have any questions. We've been to the Conservation Commission, and they were generally in favor because they don't like the floats resting on the bottom. We've also met with the Shellfish Department, and they prefer to have the elevated walkway rather than the float sitting on the bottom also. I don't think we have slightly different criteria, as you might recall, for things that are not non-conforming single-family residences. There aren't many that actually fit this situation. I mean, we have adequacy of the site in terms of the size of the proposed use. Well, we already have the use on there. We're actually making it more conforming because we're moving it off the property line. Suitability of the site for the proposed use. Well, you wouldn't want to put a dock anywhere but in the water, and we've got water, so I think we're good with that. Traffic flow and safety, not an issue really. Neighborhood visual character, so waterfront neighborhood, and there are other piers in the situation as well. So I think the most important one is the one that says impact on the natural environment, including slopes, vegetation, wetlands, groundwater, and water bodies. And we think this proposal is a very definite improvement over the existing structure. So this is not a substantially more detrimental standard. This is whether the use involved will not be detrimental to the established or future character of the neighborhood and the town. And it has been found that the use will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the bylaw. So that would be my presentation. I can talk longer if you want, but and Dave's here if you have any questions on the engineering.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Is there anyone here today on Microsoft Teams who would like to speak in favor of this application?
I see no one that wishes to speak in favor.
Okay, I'll read the correspondence. First, we have a note. This is from Nicole Smith. She's our Conservation Commission agent. And she writes, on October 25th, the Conservation Commission has approved the plan. A permit is pending issuance based on any changes the ZBA may require. Then we have a memorandum. This is from Renee Gagne. She's the Shellfish Constable for the town of Chatham. She writes on October 18th. I have reviewed the proposed site plan dated 7/29/22 for the reconstruction of a pre-existing non-conforming pier and floating dock located at 20 Jericho Lane and have no objections to the plan as proposed. Replacement of the seaward portion of the existing pier with an elevated gangway will eliminated, doesn't make sense. How about will eliminate the current grounding and may benefit water flow and improve shellfish habitat in the immediate and adjacent areas. The addition of public access stairs is also an approved benefit. Thank you for your consideration. Then we have a note from Terry Savage, October 25th. We are in favor of the proposal to replace the pre-existing permanent pier at 20 with one that is 25% less square footage and removable, so the impact is significantly less than the previous structure. And it's Terry Savage, FASLA, 103 Aunt Nabby's Lane. Another email, this is from Larry Gordon. He writes on October 25th, my neighbor and friend Mark had mentioned he would like support in the rebuild of the existing pier/float at 20. The Gordons at 98 Aunt Neighbors Lane support these changes. All the improvement that Mark and Susan are doing will be a pleasant change for the river and the neighborhood itself. And then we have an email. This is from Lippis Enterprises, Nick and Lillian Lippis, 45 Westwood Hoe Drive in Chatham. They write on October 25th, I have reviewed the application and am in favor of this project. Having lived across the river from the applicants for 20-plus years, I found that this project will be beneficial to the river in a few key areas, including navigation, enjoyment of the coastal resource, and safety. And that's the extent of the correspondence. If there's anyone in the audience, either here or on Microsoft Teams, that wishes to speak against this application or has a specific question.
I see no one that wishes to speak in opposition or has a question.
Okay. Questions from the board? Mr. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. I have no questions for Attorney Riley.
I have no questions, Steve.
So, Bill, I'm concerned about the size of the float increasing. Is there a maximum size on a float?
Apparently not. We have, in our bylaw, we have a maximum area of docks, square footage, which is 600 square feet. Oh. Dave will explain.
300 square feet for a float.
300?
Yeah. And so the 600 that Bill speaks of, it goes back to the programmatic permit that's issued by the Army Corps of Engineers and Chapter 91 folks. So if you meet the 600 square feet requirement, the permitting is less obstructive, so to speak. And so the existing dock is 600 square feet. This one is total 600 square feet from mean high water, including the float.
And isn't it true that South Coastal, blah, 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 whatever, has a moratorium on floats in Stage Harbor and Oyster River? You can't get one anymore.
Well, there's a bylaw that prohibits new docks. Has nothing to do with floats.
Okay.
That I'm aware of.
Oh, it's just the docks? The floats are not included?
There's a mooring moratorium, which would include floats.
Right.
Bottom anchored floats.
Bottom anchored floats.
So bottom anchored floats are allowed under the bylaw with only a permit being required from the harbor master's office. Because it goes with the mooring permit for the Stage Harbor complex. A pier is separate in our bylaw as a structure and a whole slew of requirements, one of them being no new piers in the Stage Harbor complex.
Is the new proposed more square footage when you add in the whole dock and the float?
It's 600 square feet, the old dock is 600 square feet. That is why we're narrowing the walkway, the fixed portion of the pier.
Yep.
So the whole thing stays at 600 square feet.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
Randy?
I have no questions.
Paul?
Dave is interesting to listen to because he does know what he's talking about. It's more fun to listen to Bill because he doesn't necessarily know what he's talking about. I have no questions.
Well, I knew about the 600 square feet.
Okay. All right.
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds.
Need a vote?
Buck votes yes.
All votes yes.
And Dave Thompson votes yes.
Dave Veach votes yes.
I vote yes. Buck, what do you think of it?
Well, I will support it, but I don't like the increased size of the float. Something doesn't jive putting more square footage in the river. That's a navigational aid, the way I see it, but I will support it.
Randy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think you did a good presentation, Bill. Very good. And I agree with your interpretation, and I think it will be an improvement to the neighborhood. Thank you.
Paul?
Yes, I think it meets all the criteria. I will vote in favor of it.
I agree with everyone else, and I definitely will vote in favor of it.
And I agree with the previous.
Okay.
I'll move to approve the application as submitted.
Dave Veach seconds.
All right, a vote?
Buck votes yes.
Paul votes yes.
Dave Thompson votes yes.
Dave Veach votes yes.
And I vote yes, that's a unanimous vote. Thank you, Mr. Riley.
Thank you. And Buck, just for your information, the standard float would be 10 feet wide. That would be its width into the harbor, into the river. The new float, although it's longer, is narrower, so it's only 8 feet. So it actually intrudes less into the channel than the standard float would, by 2 feet.
If you were tacking in the river, those extra length would be a
Oh,
pain.
see, here's the thing. If you're tacking in the river, you're a masochist.
Well, let's put that to a vote, yeah, right. Okay. All right, Sarah, how about 22-087, please?
Application number 22-087, St. Christopher's Church, care of Richard Roy, 123A Queen Anne Road, Harwich, Mass. 02645. Owner of property located at 625 Main Street, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 14E, Block 0, Lot 41A. The applicant seeks a dimensional variance from the required abutter setback for the installation of a 12-foot high fence. The fence is proposed to be installed 4.1 feet from the southerly abutter where a 5-foot setback is required. A dimensional variance is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 10, and Section 8D2C of the Chatham Protective Bylaw.
Good afternoon, everyone. Rick Roy from Rick Roy Construction. I also have Dick Cracer here. He is representing, he's a spokesman for the St. Christopher's Church, and he's the fine upstanding gentleman that got me into this situation. So they came to me and they were proposing that they wanted to put up a 12-foot high fence with soundproofing on the back of it. And before I would proceed any farther, I did go and meet with Sarah and Jay because it involves a building next door that's owned by Ron Rudnick, okay, who's actually been quite cooperative with the church. But at the time that they built the restaurant, there was no bylaw that said that you couldn't put mechanicals into the setback. And so at this particular location, because there's a kitchen there, they have this ventilation equipment that's not just sitting on the ground, it actually elevates itself because they have to stack it to get the fumes higher off the ground or whatever. So over the years that the church has been working with Ron, they've tried to come up with different solutions as to what they could do with all of this equipment, and no matter what they came up with, it was just moving from one position to another, and all the same conditions would exist if they moved it. So in working with the church, the church is, at their expense, has proposed to put up this cedar fence. We designed it so that it would kind of blend in, and in reality, by the time it turns color and it'll look like the side of the building, and all the ugly equipment will disappear. But what happens in the back of the church is that they, and you can correct me, Dick, if I'm not saying this correctly, is they have a garden there, and if they actually have funeral proceedings that take place in the back of the church. So when these things are being done in the summertime, they have to do it over the roar of the fans that are running next door at the restaurant. So what they proposed, all right, is that they would put up this 12-foot fence, all right, because they could hang off the back of it soundproofing material. We've researched this all out. And it would be high enough to mask the units themselves and absorb the sound, which would then help to quiet the whole situation in the back of the church. And so that's what we're here for. We're here to see if you guys will allow us to put this fence up. Now, it's heavily vegetated down there, as you saw, and we did get approved at the HBDC. And their requirement was that, we try to mask the fence, all right, with, some vegetation, which we agreed to. And I think that by the time it's up and vegetated, it's really going to look like the side of the building. You just won't see the equipment. I mean, you're talking if you've been down there to see it, you know, the distance from the side of the restaurant to the fence is pretty minimal. So it's not like it's gonna stick out like a sore thumb, but it's certainly gonna help to solve the problem of the noise. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Is there anyone here on Microsoft Teams that would like to speak in favor of this application?
I see no one that wishes to speak in favor.
So the correspondence, we have a certificate of appropriateness from the HBDC. On October 5th, 2022, they voted 5 in favor, 0 and opposed, 0 abstaining, to approve with conditions. The condition is additional vegetation screening will be installed along the proposed 12-foot fence at a minimum of 4 feet in height. And then we have a note from Nicole Smith, Conservation. She writes, on October 25th, the applicant filed an administrative review with the Conservation Department. We have no issue with the installation of a fence on this property, and that's the extent of the correspondence. Is there anyone in the audience, either here or on Microsoft Teams, who would like to speak either against or has a specific question in regard to this application?
I see no one that wishes to speak in opposition or has a question.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question I want to ask because I was told by Mr. Riley that I did not go through the criteria of a variance, okay, but I could, all right? I mean, criteria of a variance is lot shape, topography, soil conditions. So I certainly could say that the proximity of the building and the difference in the height of the lot in the back of the church and the height of the restaurant next door is the reason the fence needs to be taller, because the whole structure sits taller than the backyard of the church. And also, you know, everything is stuffed in there because, of course, being in a business district, all the setbacks and everything are much closer, right? But this isn't really a hardship, okay, that the church brought on themselves, okay? They're actually trying to fix a hardship that was created by their neighbor when they put this building up and then decided to put a restaurant in and put all of the ventilation equipment on the side of the building. So, you know, I mean, it's a stretch to meet this criteria, but I think that when you read, you know, what the purpose of the Zoning Board of Appeals is to try to maintain the quality of life. I mean, it's the first part of the you know, the bylaws when you read it. And certainly by allowing this structure to go here, which is really going to be masked by all the trees, if it solves the problem of the noise between the restaurant and the church, I think it would be a good thing to do.
Questions? Randy?
Thank you. So, Mr. Roy, I'm a little confused. Isn't the variance for the setback deficiency? So you make it, I thought you said that the height of the fence. I definitely kind of got confused.
Well, because in the bylaw, I don't think you're allowed to put a fence over 6 feet in the setback.
So it's both things?
Right.
So you really should be 5 feet away, right? And the fence shouldn't be 12 feet high? Okay, I just wanted to clarify that for right now. Thanks.
Actually, just to clarify that a little bit, if you met the setback, you could go 12 feet, could you not?
That's correct. Fences under 6 feet can go right up to the
But
property line. with no setback.
but I think Dick can speak to this. Aren't there some burials out there of ashes or something that prohibits us from moving the fence?
Thank you very much. Dick Cracer, I'm a member of the facilities team at St. Christopher's Church. The problem even gets a bit more complicated in the fact that some of this equipment is on the church property, at which point we are subdividing the property and selling 100 square feet of this property to Ron Rudnick, rather than having him try to remove the equipment and move it back. I have a picture, I should have made copies of this, that shows what it looks like. And I don't know, it's the way you can see it, but what you will see is only about 15 inches above the current vegetation that's there, which are those rhododendrons in the back. I drew a little line there to show about where the top of the 12-foot fence will go. That picture was taken earlier this year. By now, those bushes actually will just about completely cover it. But if we try to move in any farther and move in farther, we run into the memorial garden burials that are there. Most of this, of course, is not for the people that are buried there. They don't seem to be complaining about the noise. But it's a pleasant spot for people to take a respite during the day, and also it's becoming very popular to have baptisms out there, and even church, I should say wedding pictures being taken there and everything. And unfortunately, at one point in time, the owners would turn off the fans for us, but that turns out to be a violation of health code laws, and you need to have those running when you have gas stoves running. And so they create enough noise that you and I would not be able to have a conversation here at this level.
So just to clarify that for me, what you're doing is deeding a portion of your property to Mr. Rudnick? Or?
That's correct, to make up, so he doesn't have to move his equipment off the, when the setback was created where his equipment is, there's a retaining wall which was built on church property by error, and some of the equipment is also on church property. So in agreement with him, rather than him spending the money to move the equipment, we are deeding him enough property that all of his equipment will be back on his property, including that retaining wall.
And to clarify that a little bit more, there really isn't anywhere for him to move the equipment. The equipment basically is up against the building and just protrudes off the side of the building. So it's not like he could pay somebody to pick it up and move it. It takes up all the space and a little bit more.
If you do not deed a small section to him, would you be able to meet the setback requirement?
I could not answer that question.
I don't believe so.
I don't think so.
We'd be very close.
It's very close, yeah.
But we would not be able to meet it. And we're only missing it by a small amount now as it is, but we have to.
You're missing it, according to the documentation, you're missing it by 9/10 of a foot.
Right.
And I assume that what you're saying is that you miss it by 9/10 of a foot after deeding a small section of your property?
No, that's current. The deed has not taken place yet.
Okay, so you miss it by 9/10.
And we're deeding roughly a 1 foot by 50 foot piece. I don't have that piece with me today.
So are you going to be more out of compliance with setback after
No, we
deeding
should
the
be
property?
less.
Pardon me?
We should be less.
I don't know that you're answering that correctly.
No?
Because I think I understand what Paul is saying.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So in other words, if you're giving more of your land, you're moving your setback farther back. So you're less conforming if you put the fence in the same place, if you're moving the property line. So, there is the possibility that we could maintain that line if instead of selling the land, but I don't know that the church wanted to give an easement. Didn't they consider that?
Yes, the diocese did not, the power that we report to did not want to give an easement on that. They preferred that we made it clean and changed the property line.
Well, it sounds to me as if you gave an easement instead of deeding the property, that you would not necessarily need any relief from us
Yeah, I think we'd still need, we'd still be at the same 9/10 of a foot that we would miss it by. Because they haven't changed that yet. What you're looking at is what exists at this time. There has been no change in land or easement at this point.
Well, the problem, though, is that you're going to, if you deed additional property to them, you're
making it
going to
worse.
be, you're going to have a worse situation, and the relief you get here won't be sufficient.
Which is true.
Yes, but it gives him more property for where his
I know, but
equipment is.
the point that is being made here is that we're seeking, because you guys are doing all of this stuff while we're trying to get this approved.
Right.
There's, they haven't changed the land, but they think they may change it in the future, which is something that they've been working on that I'm not aware of. So you're correct that in the event that they give him more land, that what we're asking for forgiveness would change. And if you're giving a foot and we're 9/10, it sounds to me like we'd be putting the fence on his property. So we could say that no matter where the property line ends up, we would be 9/10 from that property line, and then it would be what we're asking for. Because basically the idea is we're 9/10 from it now. If they give them a foot of property, we just have to move the fence back a foot and still stay at 9/10 from the property line. But in other words,
Yeah, I think
in
you're-
simplistic, I know you guys have had a lot of cases here today or whatever, right? But in reality, okay, all we're trying to do is mask the sound that's coming from this units with a fence. And the closer we can get the fence to the equipment, the more effective the sound is gonna be. If we stop moving the fence, let's say we were 5 feet away from the property line, we're not really, that's not gonna really have the opportunity to absorb the sound, so.
Well,
anyways.
I get the overall concept of what you're trying to do. The problem is that, as you know, Rick, the criteria for a variance are very tough, and I'm uncomfortable with the idea that, there's going to be some deeding of property and the line's going to change, and where is it that the fence is going to be in relationship to the line at that point? I
And I
think
think
we sort
that
of need
under
to
those
nail that down a
circumstances-
little bit better than
Yeah.
I mean,
what we have it right now.
This fence will still be on our property.
Yeah, but
That's being done by the surveyor.
Sarah has a comment.
So the issue is that you are asking to be 4.1 feet off of your property line. If those property lines change, the board could potentially be granting a variance for a specific variance for 4.1 feet.
Right, and that's why I said
If
that,
that property line changes and the fence now becomes closer, you need to come back and seek another variance, because all we're varying is 4.1
no,
feet
I understand that. So
rather
what I
than
would
whatever
say,
it would be.
what I would say, based upon his information, because they certainly haven't been in a large rush to get this done, because it's been quite a while since we initially started this, and you've been working with Ron over the
Almost 2
land,
years, yeah.
almost a year, that if we were to have them make their decision, I mean, we could continue, figure out whether or not they're gonna sell the property or not, so that when we come back to you, we'd have our ducks in a row, so to speak, because right now, it appears that, we could also say that we would maintain that margin of 4.1 feet if you granted that variance, right? All we'd have to do is move the fence back the foot that they're going to. But I'm okay, as far as I'm concerned, to say, we'll just continue it, so if the church figures out what they're gonna do and they decide that they're gonna sell the land, we would come back with a definitive approach to say, this is where the property line is and this is what we're asking for.
Yeah, I think honestly, Rick, that is the correct thing to do. I think you would, and because we have no idea what the timetable is, I really
Right.
think you should ask to withdraw and come back whenever everybody's figured that out.
Okay, are you good with that, Dick?
Certainly.
Okay, so we'll just come back when we're good.
Well, so officially ask us,
Yeah, we'll have to
you'd
do
like
it
to
over.
withdraw. You'd like to
Yeah,
withdraw.
yeah, so,
Okay.
I'll move to grant the requested withdrawal without prejudice.
So I'd have a comment that Coastal's a very nice company, but putting this on an 8.5 by 11 in the part that we're talking about is only a half a square inch. Maybe we can get a better print showing us the abutters property and the abutters equipment. There's nothing on this blueprint showing the fans or the exhausts or and you're saying that they're on your property. So that should all be laid out, and forget Main Street and forget the hash marks for the church. I think we're really focused down in that, I'm gonna say southwest corner of the property. That's just my suggestion.
No, I think it's a good one. Okay, you made a motion.
Dave Veach seconds.
Okay, we need a vote.
Buck votes yes.
Paul votes yes.
Dave Thompson, yes.
Dave Veach votes
And
yes.
I vote yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
That was a withdrawal, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Because they have no idea when it's going to happen. If it does happen, who knows?
Divine intervention.
Rick? Here's one more application.
Okay, Sarah.
Application number 22-088, St. Christopher's Church, care of Rick Roy, 123A Queen Anne Road, Harwich, Mass. 02645. Owner of property located at 625 Main Street, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 14E, Block 0, Lot 41A. The applicant seeks to install a fence within a conservancy district. The proposed fencing is allowed by special permit under Section 4A3A of the Protective Bylaw. The lot contains 9,200 square feet in a GB1 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 9, and Section 8D2B of the Protective Bylaw.
I would assume that the proper thing to do here is withdraw without prejudice, and we'll come back again.
Yes.
I'll move to grant the requested withdrawal without prejudice.
Dave Veach seconds.
We need a vote?
Paul votes yes.
Dave Thompson, yes.
Dave Veach votes yes.
I vote yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Roy.
David? Well, I'm going to, David, can I surrender my position as a voting member but still stay for the next 15 or 20 minutes? And
Sure. So Randy, so the voting on this will be Randy, Paul, myself, and the two Daves over there. Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's have the B-Tom.
Application number 22-039, 1238 Main LLC, care of William F. Riley Esquire, P.O. Box 707, Chatham, Mass. 02633. Owner of property located at 1238 Main Street, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 11E, Block 7, Lot 32. The applicant proposes to establish and operate a formula business, commercial indoor recreation facility, which utilizes a standard array of services and logo used by 10 or more other businesses worldwide. The facility will include 1,586 square feet of space in a general business zone, which requires the grant of a special permit. The lot contains 29,952 square feet in the GB3 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 9, and Sections 3C, 4C9, 3C, 4C28, and 8D2B of the Protective Bylaw. This was continued from June 9th and August 11th, 2022.
So, I never thought of Chatham as being overregulated until I ran into this project, where this poor woman just wanted to have 10 little machines in her so people could go exercise. That's a change of use. That means you have to file a site plan. And then, under the building code, they would have to sprinkle the entire building, which would cost $200,000. So, we would request a withdrawal without prejudice. They're just gonna do retail, and, which doesn't require any approval at all. So
You've requested.
we've requested withdrawal.
Anybody have any questions? No need to.
I'll move to request, to grant the requested withdrawal without prejudice.
And Dave Veach seconds.
Buck approves.
Paul votes yes.
Dave votes yes.
Dave Veach votes yes.
And I vote yes. That's a unanimous decision. Thank you, Mr. Riley. Okay, Sarah, let's see, how about 22-070, please?
Application number 22-070, All Realty Trust, care of William F. Riley Esquire, P.O. Box 707, Chatham, Mass. 02633. Owner of property located at 37 Clamshell Drive, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 16A, Block 29, Lot H76. The applicant seeks to enlarge, extend, or change a non-conforming dwelling on a non-conforming lot via the demolition of the existing dwelling and the construction of a new dwelling. The existing dwelling is non-conforming in that it is located 8.8 feet from the road, 11.6 feet from the northerly abutter, 15.8 feet from the westerly abutter, and entirely within the Coastal Conservancy District floodplain elevation 13. The proposed dwelling will be non-conforming in that it will be located 3.4 feet from the road, where a 40-foot setback is required, 11 feet from the northerly abutter, 7.8 feet from the westerly abutter, where a 25-foot setback is required, and entirely within the Coastal Conservancy District, where a 50-foot setback is required. Also proposed is the installation of a driveway as allowed by special permit under Section 4A3D of the Protective Bylaw. The existing building coverage is 811 square feet, and the proposed building coverage is 860 square feet, where 2,800 square feet is the maximum allowed. The lot is non-conforming in that it contains 0 square feet of buildable upland where 20,000 square feet is required, and contains 5,674 square feet of land area where 40,000 square feet is required in the R40 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Sections 6 and 9, and Sections 5B and 8D2B of the Protective Bylaw. This was continued from August 25th, 2022.
Good afternoon, Bill Riley on behalf of Allison O. Allison's here with us today. When we were last here, there was some concern about the height of the building. And so we've gone back and done our homework a little bit. So the height of the building has been reduced now, where the original building was a little over 30 feet. Now it's 28 feet, 6 inches. Can you put it up on the screen? What a handsome building. I meant the building plans. Okay, now, can you expand it so we can read the numbers?
Even expanded, it's gonna be tough to read.
Yeah, I know. But, so it's 28 feet, 6 inches from top of the foundation to the ridge. So that gives us a building height from nearest adjacent grade of 35 feet. And so Allison, has a family and they'd like to have 2 good bedrooms upstairs, and they felt that if they reduced the ridge significantly, the living space upstairs would be kind of short. So what we did, there was some concern that this building was somehow larger or taller than other buildings in the neighborhood. And so yours truly spent an hour in the building department this morning looking through all the buildings that have been changed on Scallop Terrace, Clamshell, and a couple on Morris Island Road. And The buildings are all about the same height. They're about 28, between 28 and 29 feet from top of foundation to the ridge. So, for instance, 181 Morris Island Road, which is the property, can you put up the assessor's map? Great, so Sarah's colored in 181 Morris Island Road, which is across Clamshell Drive from our property. And according to the site plan filed when they went to the zoning board, that building is 34 feet, 6 inches, the ridge, 34 feet, 6 inches. Ours is 35 feet, is the ridge from the nearest sedation grade. 191 Shore Road doesn't have an application that shows that when the building was constructed, so I couldn't tell you the height of that. But I can tell you that I drove down Morris Island Road to get a good view of both 181 and 191. And the difference between the two ridges is maybe a foot, maybe a foot and a half. And then we have, looking around, we have so the buildings on Clamshell are, that have been modified, are between 33.7 feet and 34.6 feet. If you look at 2 Scallop Terrace, that is 34.7 feet. 8 Scallop Terrace, which is currently under construction, is again 34.6. The building itself is 28 feet. I was incorrect. That number 2 Scallop Terrace is not the one. Number 3 Scallop Terrace is the one that has been rebuilt and is 34 feet 6 inches.
Mr. Chair, could I just interrupt for 1 second? Bill's talking about elevation, not building height. When he's saying 34 or 35, he's not talking about exceeding the maximum allowed building height. He's talking about elevation.
Right, yeah, pardon me. Yeah, that's the,
Thank you, Mr. Briggs.
thank you, Mr. Briggs. Yeah, that's the engineer's determination of the height of the building measured from the nearest adjacent grade. So, but the buildings themselves, from top of foundation to the ridge, they're all in the same 27.5 to 28.5 height. So in other words, the height of our building is, as proposed, is the same height as those other buildings. There are still a couple of smaller buildings, obviously, that haven't been elevated, but given the floodplain, presumably at some point they're all going to be elevated. In fact, I drove down Morris Island Road. I had to drive through the water. I drove down Little Beach Road. So the water was up to my hubcaps, and I looked across, and the entire field just south of 46, your favorite spot, Mr. Nixon, was flooded with water to a height over a foot above the road surface. So there's a reason why it's in the floodplain. In any event, so in terms of, is this proposal substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood as a whole? And I know there was some concern about the height of the building, because one of the members kept referring to 46 Little Beach Road, which of course stands all by itself like a sore thumb as you drive into that area. But when you look at 27 Little Beach, and because they don't show up at 15 and 21, that's a single building now. Those are all about the same height because they were all developed after FEMA raised the floodplain to elevation 13 in this zone. So so when as we go through the criteria, I want you to consider the fact that although our ridge height, the elevation of our ridge height is 35, the difference between these buildings is really, if there's a small change in the grade level of the lot itself, so if 181, our nearest adjacent grade is 6 feet. Well, if at 181, it's 5.5 feet, well, that would explain why they're 34.6 instead of 35. So, but the point is that the structures themselves are all approximately the same height, particularly the ones that have been modified after the 2014 change in the FEMA elevation, where it went from elevation 9 to elevation 13, an additional 4 feet. So any reconstruction of the building has to start with an 8-foot structure to support the building. And so the living area itself is really only 21 feet from the first floor to the ridge. I mean, so it's not a big building. And and so can you put the picture back up, Sarah, please?
The assessors?
No, the very nice picture that makes it look so cute. So, as you can see, I mean, so the first floor starts at up 8 feet, which is actually elevation 14 or 14.3. And then you add 21 feet to that. I mean, that's a 1.5-story building, like all the other buildings in the neighborhood. There are no full 2-story buildings, at least I didn't see any. But because they have that 8-foot FEMA foundation under them, they look large. Again, what's the neighborhood? And is this building, which is the same height as many of the other buildings that have been approved there, whether the structure itself is the same height, is that substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood? And I would suggest it's not. So let me run through the criteria. So adequacy of the size of the site in terms of the proposed use. So the footprint of the building is not changing. Well, we're changing. We're adding a cover over the front door. So we're going from 811 square feet to 860 square feet. So again, we would suggest that in terms of adequacy of the size, to the extent that the existing lot, which is over 5,000 square feet, is adequate, that it's adequate for the proposed structure, which is just an additional, what's that, 39 square feet. compatibility of the size of the proposed structure with neighboring properties. So, beating a dead horse here, but I did go out to the town hall and look at all these other buildings. And almost all the other buildings that have been elevated since 2014, the structure itself is either between 27 and 28 and a half feet from foundation to ridge. So I think that, we are compatible. There's no increase in the footprint. Obviously, we're doubling the living area, because right now it's a single floor. And now we're gonna have a floor, floor and a half. So we have 860 square feet on the second level as well. That merely provides for 3 modern bedrooms and bathrooms and a modern kitchen and dining area. Extent of the proposed increase in non-conforming nature of the structure or use. We're increasing the living area on a non-conforming lot, and we're also increasing the height of the building, but we're not creating a new non-conformity. Increasing the living area is considered an intensification of the non-conforming use. Suitability of the site, including but not limited to impact on neighboring properties, on the natural environment, including slopes, vegetation, wetlands, groundwater, water bodies, and stormwater runoff. Well, I think the first thing we have to comment on is that now the building is going to be FEMA compliant, so that floodwaters, if they ever get there, which is probably not in the too distant future, will be able to flow through the building. Under our bylaw, there's a concern about expansion, lateral expansion, what effect it's going to have. Here, there's virtually no lateral expansion, just 39 square feet. So we believe that, so from a flood water point of view, a house with a FEMA foundation is vastly superior to a rigid structure not designed to meet the FEMA standards. Our lot is level, so we don't consider that there would be a serious runoff issue. So we believe that the site is suitable for the proposed work. Just a side note, if you watch the television coverage of Hurricane Ian down in Fort Myers, the houses that remained were the houses that had FEMA foundations under them. And that's why the town should be encouraging homes in the floodplain to meet the FEMA standards. Impact of scale, siting, and mass on the neighborhood visual character. The proposed ridge is 35 feet. That's a little less than 12 feet over the existing ridge. But I think you have to take into account the fact that the property's in the floodplain, flood elevation is 13, so the first floor has to be 1 foot above 13, so it's 14.3 feet is the elevation. So then you have a structure that's 21 feet. So you take it's a 21-foot tall house, and you put it on top of a FEMA foundation, and now the ridge is 35 feet elevation, but the building's still only 28 feet from top to bottom, even with the FEMA foundation. So I think, keeping in mind the neighborhood character and the structures that surround this building, both on Morris Island Road and on Scallop Terrace and on Little Beach Road, you could find that this structure with its with the scale of the structure and the mass of the structure are very much similar to the other buildings that have been modified in the neighborhood. And we think that those modifications are an improvement because they comply with the FEMA requirements. We have a beautiful standard Cape design with dormers. And so I think you could find that in terms of the neighborhood visual character, this building is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. You may recall that there were concerns expressed by some neighbors about impact of their views or the way the property presented to their neighbors. And so one of the neighbors, the McConnells, who live at 191 Morris Island Road, have written a letter in support of the application because we made modifications from the very first presentation where they'd proposed moving the building over on the lot. We moved it back to its original footprint. So the McConnells are in favor of it. The Shuey family, which is across the street, and they had a concern about their views, which they expressed at the last meeting, and they have written a letter in support of the application. So I think that's important to note in terms of it. Is it substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood? Well, the neighbors don't think so, so we're happy about that. And that's because Allison has worked with the neighbors, providing them with copies of plans and meeting with them to understand their concerns and trying to address them. I don't think, because of the way the houses are all clustered in there, other than the McConnells and the Shueys, I don't think other properties have a concern about views or vistas. In terms of the streetscape, I think it's a very attractive building, and I hope you agree. But again, it's in keeping with the neighborhood, and I think it's not substantially more detrimental than the existing structure. So compatibility of the proposed use, as with most of the properties down there, it's a single-family residence. Ours is a single-family residence, and it's going to remain that way, so it will be compatible. Method of sewage disposal, source of water and drainage. This project will require the installation of a new septic system, which should improve things, and we don't, because of the level nature of the property, we don't think there's a drainage problem. Impact on traffic flow and safety. One benefit of elevating these houses is it provides room underneath the house for automobile storage. So there will have less vehicles in the roadway or crowding a driveway at the end of the roadway. So we think that's a positive. It's not anticipated that there'll be any increase in noise or litter on the property. It's still going to be a single-family residence. And we don't think, adequate utilities, visual impact on the neighborhood. It's not a formula business. And number 12, extent of lateral expansion proposed and the extent to which lateral expansion impacts the impervious area of the site. Well, what's really happening here is that there's going to be a reduction in the impervious area because the building's being elevated. There'll be more area available for stormwaters to percolate into the ground. So we think that that's a benefit. So So again, is the building as proposed, and would you put the picture up again? I like the picture. Substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing structure. And I don't believe that it is. I think it's they use the deck around it to break up some of the verticality. Some of the other houses, don't have that deck that, as I say, breaks up the verticality of the building. So we think you could find that it's not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. That'll be our presentation.
Is there anyone here on Microsoft Teams who would like to speak in favor of this application?
I see no one that wishes to speak in favor.
Then I'll read the correspondence. This is from Peter McConnell, 191 Morris Island Road. He writes on October 25th, we are direct abutters to the north and west of the proposed project. As we indicated in a previous letter to the board, the applicant has addressed the issues that we had with the original proposal. At the last meeting, she also agreed to reduce the size of the second-story balcony to 5 feet by 8 feet. With these changes, we support the proposal. The north side of the project, which abuts our land, is approximately 3 feet above the roadway. That soil supports our septic retaining wall and privet hedge. We would like assurances that that soil will remain for support. Thank you for your attention to this matter, Peter and Susan McConnell. This is a letter from Charles and Ann Shuey, 32 Clamshell Drive. It was received on October 25th. It was written on the 24th. We are writing in reference to this. We embrace the right of property owners to enhance their property and attendant value of it. We have reviewed the revised building plans with respect to this application. The revised plan, if we are correct, has a roof ridge line 28 feet above the road. We assume above average grade means above the road, which has reduced our issue of height of the new residence blocking our view. Given this change, we would support the plans. That said, we fully expect that since we are directly across from 37, any damage to our landscaping would be fully corrected to our satisfaction, or that we would be fairly compensated. Further, if the building contractors use our driveway, that our driveway of clamshells and its railroad-tie perimeter would be restored to its original appearance. Finally, since we are seasonal residents and reside at 32 Clamshell from approximately Memorial Day to Columbus Day, we would appreciate having construction prohibited during that period to allow us to enjoy our property. Then we have an email. This is from Susan and Chris Jacquot, Jacquot, 27 Clamshell. I wanted to tell you that we are in full support of the revised drawings. The meeting is tomorrow. I'm sorry I sent this late. Then we have another email. This is from
Susan Hamill.
Yes. October 22nd. I'm a neighbor and I live at 16 Scallop. I have owned my cottage for over 20 years and have seen many changes over time. I have no objection to their project. Thank you, Susan Hamill. Is there anyone in the audience or on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak either against this application or has a specific question? Now is the time to enter the meeting.
No one has indicated that they wish to speak in opposition or has a question.
Okay, questions from the board. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. I have no questions for Attorney Riley.
Dave Veach.
I have no questions, Dave.
Randy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions. So.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
yeah. So, my question has to do with the McConnell's letter, and I was actually looking at that while you were talking, because I went down there and I just happened to run into them when I was down there. And they were talking about the soil on the side of, where it abuts their house, and they were concerned about that. And then they've asked you in the letter about it, so.
Well,
What do you think?
I can tell you what the rules are, which is if you're in the floodplain, you can't cut or fill.
Right.
So there'll be no change in the grade.
So they don't have anything to worry about?
No, they don't have anything to worry about. Right, Jay? Right out of the book.
I have no questions.
Well, I have a couple. And congratulations, incidentally. I understand that Little Beach is being renamed Rileyville, and that's great. There's probably going to be a big sign out on 46 Little Beach, right at the point. Welcome to Rileyville, blinking neon,
I
something
know,
like that.
below that, it's going to say, as approved by the zoning board of
I know
appeals.
it. I know it. Remind me about it. So when I walk by there, and I do, that's not so far from my cottage. I go down there, walk around at least once a week, and I come to that monstrosity, and there's a mirror there, and you can look in the mirror, and
It's my wife, it's okay.
okay, thank you. You know, and it's and if I could, you know, be the evil queen, okay, from Snow White, not.
I was going to say, wait a minute.
So
You know how close it is to Provincetown? Talk about yourself as an evil
I know.
queen. I mean, come on, Dave.
I know it. And so I'm the evil chairman of the zoning board, all right?
Okay.
And I look at that mirror and I say, you know, who's the stupidest one of all? Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's it? And what do you think the mirror says? Who's the stupidest one of all?
Oh, Dave, it's really not proper. Well, it's not appropriate to compare that structure to this structure, because the reason why that structure is so offensive to you is because it sticks up like a sore thumb. Because it's all alone out there, and it looks like...
Okay, and let me ask you a question. Who was the perp that brought that to this board?
David Paretsky.
No.
Oh, I represented them, that's true.
Mr. Riley, it was you. So anyway, back to my question. Who's the stupidest one of all?
Well, you know, part of the issue is, okay,
Can you answer the question?
I can, but yet, so the idea is projecting forward. So we come in, we give you plans to look at. Now, I know myself, I am not capable of good visualization. So I look at a plan and go, oh, it looks nice. You know, and apparently there are some members of the zoning board that have the same issue. And so what we missed there, what was missed there, was the fact that nothing around it is of similar height. And the fact that because because of the requirements of the Board of Health for the septic system, we need a big retaining wall around it to contain the septic system, because the septic system has to be 1 foot above the floodplain. So, so that creates the wall. And because there's nothing on either side of it, you go, well, that looks terrible. Well, I agree, it does look terrible. But I don't think you can compare that building to Clamshell. Clamshell's a little neighborhood. You know, some of the houses have been improved, some of them haven't. The ones that have are virtually identical in size to our building, our proposal. And so,
Can you answer my question, please?
who was the stupidest?
Yes, who? I'll answer the question for you. Me.
No.
Yes.
No, see,
I'll tell you why. I'm going to tell you why. I voted for it.
I know,
I voted
but
for
Dave,
it.
the inability to consider the fact that there was nothing around it.
That's not why I voted for it. My problem was, I was your client, you know, I was more concerned about what was going to happen to his two buildings along the beach. And I allowed that to cloud my pea brain. That's why I voted for it. Anyway, I'm not saying that your client's house is like that. I'm just saying, man, what's happening down there is not great. I understand the FEMA, but FEMA didn't tie your clients up and say, you have to put on a second story. They didn't do that.
I know, but Dave, it costs over $100,000 to elevate the house. And so it's not fair to have a requirement so that you can not have to buy flood insurance, to spend $100,000 just to elevate the house. So all you get is a 1946 cottage 8 feet in the air. You know, what's fair is, you know, allowing them to spend their money in a sensible way that gives living area for their family. Who will,
Okay, let's go on. I got another question for you. You know,
Okay.
the best deals, there's good things over here and there's good things over there. I understand the good thing for your client. But what's good about this for all those homes right around her on Clemson? What's good about it?
That's not the standard.
I
The
know it.
standard is,
I'm
the
asking
standard
a
is,
question. You don't
well,
want to answer my questions, Mr.
I'll
Brown. You're making
answer
it
the
very
question.
difficult for me.
the answer to the question is, the increase in the value in this property raises the values of all the properties around it.
Okay.
And the other good thing is, you know, that if there is a flood, or if there is a hurricane with, 150 mile an hour waves and winds, that because the building's elevated like this structure is not going to damage the structures around it. The structures that haven't been elevated are the ones that are going to get destroyed, and the debris is going to go over to their neighbor's property and do damage over there.
All right, well, that's a good answer. Okay, thank you. No more questions.
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
I believe Mr. Riley's client is ready to fire him right now. On public TV.
I mean, if you want,
Well, hi, I'm Allison, the owner of 37 Clamshell. I just want to point out a couple of things, I understand the mistake that, whoever made before, but I think we should focusing on is my house 37 Clamshell. It's just a small little house. So I think we should be comparing to the two new constructions on the 8 scallop and 2 oyster, which I believe I sent it to Sarah earlier, yes.
You did.
So those are the two houses. Basically, it looks identical to my new houses. See, in terms of the size, the height, and the style, basically it looked the same. And in comparing to the lot size, my lot is close to 6,000 square feet, which is almost double the size of these houses here. So I'm not building a bigger house. I'm keeping a small house, only 1,600 square feet. So I think we should be looking at this, comparing these two other comparable houses to me, not comparing to the giant house down the street. So that's why I just want to point it out. And the other thing is, I just want to say thank you to my neighbors who sent the email and letter to Sarah to support me. I really, really appreciate that. So that's all I want to say, and I hope that the board members will approve my plan this time. Thank you.
Well, since you're there, Mr. McConnell's letter, he was looking for assurances that the soil will remain there for support. And Mr. Riley didn't really answer the question. He talked about, what's legal, what's not. Do you agree with that?
Of course, yeah.
And I
That's
think
a really minor thing, Of course, my point is, I'm not trying to disrupt my neighbor. I'm sorry.
And Mr. Shuey's request?
well, we do have a modification of that. I mean, the standard consideration would be June 1st. June 1st? No,
Typically, it's June 30th.
June 30th to Labor Day.
Well, he's asking for essentially June 1st until October 1st. That's what he's requesting.
I
Is
know,
that
but-
something that you and your client would agree to?
Well, it's over 5 months.
I'm telling you, that's his request. I didn't make the request.
I understand that. So
My
we're
question
saying,
is to you, is that a yes or a no?
we're saying July, August, and September.
I think that's reasonable, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, 3 months. We would prefer the 3 months.
Okay, well, thank you for answering the question.
You say June 15th to September 15th.
Okay. Thank you. Paul, motion, please?
I will move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds.
Randy?
Approve.
Paul?
I approve.
Dave?
I approve, sir.
Dave?
Dave
And
Veach votes
I
yes.
approve. Paul?
Well, I think the last time around, I felt that the applicant had met our necessary standards. I think probably it's been improved, no doubt due to feedback from other members of the board. So I think it does satisfy our criteria. It is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood.
Dave Thompson?
Dave Thompson agrees with Paul Semple.
Dave Veach?
Yeah, yes, I definitely, when I was going through recently and some papers and, you know, where you started with this project to where it is now is a significant improvement and change. And I very much appreciate that. And I think it looks much, much better, and this fits the neighborhood. I don't think you could do a better job of fitting into the neighborhood and doing what you need to do. I appreciate your being willing to reduce the size of that second floor deck. I think I think you'll be better off, everyone will be better off with that.
Thank you.
And certainly, this is not substantially more detrimental in the neighborhood. I think I think, given all the considerations, and I've got photos of other houses in the neighborhood that I went around and took, and when I look at this, especially in relation to those, it looks, the 181 Morris Island Road looks very similar to this, and I think they did a great job. I just want to digress for a second, Dave, in that I also have a photo here of the 46 or 47, what it is, Morris Island Road. And I know how you feel because I voted for it as well. And so if it got by me, that got by me, you shouldn't feel bad. I'm much better at visualizing these things, and believe me, I just didn't see that coming. And I'm unfortunate to say that I also, on paper, the design looked better than it does in real life. It doesn't look like a good response to the height restrictions and things. That said, at the same time, there's a house also very close to that we approved a number of years ago that I look at and every time and I go, I'm sorry that we did that one, but you know,
Yeah, I
we've
know
got
the
a
one.
couple of them down there, but they certainly, I agree, and I just want to respect that, but certainly I would not apply that, my thinking about that to this proposal.
Randy?
Thank you. I agree with everything that's been said. I think the house is beautiful. And I'm glad that Mr. Riley gave me the visual of what it would look like without the second floor or without the half floor. It would look awful like that. And it would certainly be detrimental to the neighborhood not to have that second floor. And I appreciate you working with your neighbors about this. and I would support it.
Thank you.
Well, I know you're going to be shocked, but I'm going to support it too. I just wanted to give you a bad time, Mr. Riley, because you deserve it. But anyway,
That was a legitimate discussion.
I know. You did a great job, I think, of changing things to satisfy your neighbors, which is very important to us. I see it every day, whether I'm going to my house, because I live on Stage Island, or so I thought today, driving by, it's going to look pretty good.
Thank you.
I really do.
Thank you.
So, congratulations, and we look forward. Now, we haven't discussed the conditions, but I think I heard you say, Mr. Riley, you would accept like June 15th to September 15th, is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Sounds good. Yes.
Well, that's certainly better than what we usually do, so. Anybody else have any thoughts about that?
I think that, along with our usual conditions, should be fine.
Okay.
What did the neighbor request? What did the neighbor request?
He said Memorial Day to Columbus Day,
Oh.
which is a little.
I'm sorry, that's too far.
No.
That's.
No,
too
I
far.
think, and this was Mr. Riley's compromise, which I think is fine.
Yeah, I mean, yes, sure.
the other was too much.
I'd go along with it. Honestly, I could go June 30th to September 30th or something, but June 30th, September 15th, I'd see that as well, so.
Paul?
I will move to approve the application as submitted with the conditions that all construction activity be contained on-site and construction vehicles be contained on-site or off-site with the permission of the property owner, that between June 15th and September 15th, no exterior construction would be allowed, no work would be permitted on weekends, and construction activity would be between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. only. And I would add that Dave and I and others also joined in the vote with respect to 46 Little Beach. We all, on occasion, don't quite see what we should see.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for, I guess I feel a little better. So I won't look at the mirror anymore.
And I second
Okay.
Paul's motion.
All right, how about a vote? Randy?
Yes.
All vote yes.
Dave Thompson votes yes with pleasure.
And I vote yes. That's a unanimous vote. Congratulations. and
Thank
good
you
luck.
very much. Thank you.
Okay,
I will,
anything else we got cooking here?
Move to adjourn.
Dave Veach seconds.
We need a vote on that, Randy?
Yes.
Paul votes yes.
I vote yes.
Dave Veach votes yes.
So we stand adjourned, and the official time, Sarah, is
6:02 PM.
6:02. Yeah, me too. I agree with you.